This isn't even a setback. This is a bump in the road.
Hi everyone. I am very happy today because it feels like Christmas because my returning guest is Rick Rule, and he's a legend, so he needs no introduction. Good morning, Rick Rule. How are you, sir?
Good morning, sir. I'm doing well. The better for being on with you. I enjoy the opportunity to talk to your audience through your medium.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Thank you. And I try to warm up. So I would like to our discussion with you because you explained it earlier that you, at one point in the 70s, the beginning of your career, your net worth went negative, right? And then I would like to learn from you if you can tell us, how did you start from this point? Who did you convince to invest with you? How did you make yourself indispensable to these people? So how did you start? And what can we
Uh,
learn from it?
that's an interesting story, actually, and there are three parts to it.
Okay.
The first thing that I did was I didn't run and hide.
Okay.
I got my five largest private creditors and my bank on the phone at once, together in a conference call. And I explained my circumstance to them. And I said that it was my intention to work until I paid everybody off, principal and interest, but that any one of them individually had the ability to bankrupt me if they accelerated the procedure. So that each was, in effect, responsible partly for the others getting whole. That I would take minimal compensation out, just enough to live on. And all of the money that I made would go to restoring my reputation and my self worth, and the obligation that I had to all of them. Following that call, two of the five, well, first of all, the bank called me afterwards and said, people who fess up and work are so rare that we will do whatever we can to work with you. Thank you. Most of the rest of the people who owe us money are folding. And the assets, the collateral that you have, stand a better chance of performing under your stewardship than they do ours.
Mm.
And we would prefer that you do that. Two of the five private parties called me up and said, what can we do to help? What is it that we can do that will help you earn your way out of this business? You've shown us character. So the first thing I did is I didn't screw anybody. Uh, I faced up my problem. I said, here's the difficulty. Here's the challenge. Here's what I hope can go right. And I have absolutely no idea when. I just know that if you will allow me, I will play fairly with you. And rather than being tolerant, they were helpful. Helpful to the extent that as I was working out my own difficulty, the bank called and so, we have a couple of other circumstances that require reorganization, and we would pay you to reorganize them for us. And so I started a business in 1982 in reorganization. And it was largely that business, the fees and the referral fees from investment banking around reorganization, that allowed me to dig my way out of the hole. The second thing that happened is that several people who I didn't owe money or favors to, that I had done business with in the decade of the 70s, valued the work I did, and understood the lessons that I had learned and the value that I still had to offer. One of them in particular, Adolf Lundin, first of all called me up and said, in the words of the rapper, you're too legit to quit. You know, work this through. There's three or four things that I need you to help me with. And as always, I would be delighted to pay you to help me. That was invaluable. If you take somebody whose self-esteem has been obliterated by going from being very wealthy to having a sub-zero net worth,
Mhm.
the fact that one of his finest mentors steps up and said, this isn't even a setback. this is a bump in the road. I'm on you like white on rice. Not only shouldn't you quit, but I'm delighted that you have some spare time so that you could take on some tasks for me. I believe in you. Critical, critical.
Um,
And I didn't quit.
yeah,
I absolutely didn't quit.
yes,
Um,
yes.
I was able in a fairly short period of time. I mean, didn't seem short then, by the way, but I was able in 3.5 years to get back to zero. It's odd when your investment goal is to get back to broke. But I always knew if I could get myself back to broke, I could get rich. I've always been able to invest. I've always been able to speculate. And I've always been able to create value by helping other people build companies, by helping people allocate capital, by helping people access credit. And I knew once I got back to broke that I was on the way.
Mhm. That also means that you had already a reputation then.
I had quite a reputation in the last year and a half. In certain circles, not a good one, but I had done a lot of work in the decade of the 70s that brought real benefit to people who were able to help me
Okay.
when I had less faith in myself.
Yeah. Okay. So that was the key. You already showed that you can provide benefits and
I was pretty beat up spiritually.
mhm.
I believed I had to do it. I believed I could do it, but I certainly went from being highly confident to unconfident. And in addition to the patience that these people showed me, what they really did is grab me by the collar and give me a couple of slaps, saying, okay, spend the weekend feeling sorry for yourself. Get ready to come back to work. You can do it. That, I can't tell you how much that helped.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know, but unbelievable. Okay, great. And I should remind the viewers that you did that and you had great return in the time when if someone retired in the 70s and true fact, he had a portfolio of 50% stocks and 50% bonds and started with a withdrawal rate of 5% per year. By 1990 or something like that, the portfolio went to zero.
Right.
So, and your portfolio or the accounts you manage, I guess,
Right.
it did not go to zero. Okay, great.
The lessons that I learned in my own reorganization, uh, the lessons around capital allocation, but the lessons around how you operate in bad times, which are better for investors than good times,
Mm-hmm.
were invaluable. The money that I've made since happened really as a consequence of learning just how cyclical and capital intensive markets are. You will recall in our first interview that I said to you that my operating ethos was that in capital intensive cyclical businesses, you are either a contrarian or you're going to be a victim.
Yeah.
I was able in the early part of the decade of the 80s to get solvent. And by the end of 1985, 86, had some money. Mercifully for me, the crash of 87 happened.
Yeah.
And it was an ugly crash. Commodities were already in the toilet, and general equities markets were off 50%, which will tell you what speculative resource equities were off 70 or 80%. Because I had some capital, I had both the tools and the courage to wade into that market. And I also had a restored client base, not a lot of them, but I could call up people who believed in me and explain how compelling some of the values were. And I could get them to invest and continue to invest as those companies either went sideways or down. When that market turned in 1990, we were generating easily 50 or 60% compound returns. and in some circumstances, much better. An example would be in 1990, we had helped Ross Beatty a lot with something called Equinox. And I think the average cost in my book was about 75 cents. We sold it for $5.75. Two things came out of that: a lot of liquidity and a lot of knowledge, a lot of courage. And talking to Ross Beatty, because he sold Equinox to Hecla, he did a deep dive in the silver business, understanding the silver business. And he said, Rick, I'm going to build a silver company. There are lots of silver assets in the world now that have had 70 or 80 million bucks spent on them. And they aren't worth anything at $5 silver, but they'll be worth a lot at 12. And I believe in the next 5 years that the silver price is going to go to 12. So we financed Ross at 50 cents a share. The problem was the silver price didn't go to 12. It went to 50. And Pan American Silver, which we financed at 50 cents, went to $45. 6 months after that, Ross Beatty introduced me to Bob Quartermain.
The legend?
The power of a Rolodex. And Bob Quartermain was talking about how to build a silver company. I said, well, Ross is going to build an operating company, and I don't think you ought to do that. There's room for one of you. And I said to Ross, oh, and by the way, a different mentor of mine, Jim Blanchard, founder of the New Orleans Conference, rest in peace, gone now, said, Rick, I want you to construct for me the most leveraged possible silver vehicle that you can. Pay attention to the downside. Don't take on any debt, but give me unbridled upside to the silver price. So keying off what I'd learned in conjunction with Ross, there were a lot of projects out that didn't lend themselves to operation anytime soon, but where you could buy ounces in the ground for 5 cents, 6 cents, 7 cents, deposits that somebody else had spent $100 million on that they were going to liquidate for $2.5 million. And Bob Quartermain in those days in Silver Standard, the company was 20% controlled by Tech Corp. So we had access to wonderful technical talent that we didn't have to pay for. Starting market capitalization there, if my memory serves me correctly, was $2.2 million. We put together a wonderful team of investors, including Chris Thompson, who went on to be the CEO of Goldfields, James Askew, an absolute legend in Australian mining. We financed the company at 72 cents, if my memory serves me correctly, with a warrant at $1.10. And that stock too went to $45. So the contrarian lessons that I learned, plus the investors that I managed to attract and the capital that I made myself through the second half of the decade of the 1980s, met this incredible opportunity. We were really, really, really positioned. And the period 1991 to 1996 was the most ludicrous small cap resource market I ever saw. It was what happens when preparation meets opportunity and is combined with youth. I had the energy in those days to work endless 15-hour days. That last attribute, sadly, now is lacking. But that really set me up. That really, 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 truly set me up. The next period where you had really ludicrously low resource equities prices was beginning in 1988. And I had seen that happen 10 or 12 years before. I'd made a boatload of money round tripping it. And again, preparation met opportunity, in particular in the uranium space. The uranium price was $8 a pound, cost the industry $30 a pound to make it. Nobody liked uranium because the companies were losing boatloads of money. And I saw a replay of my silver play, except bigger. And the most successful part of my career relative to my competition was the period 1998 to 2008. I forget the published track records of the two partnerships that I established in the early part of the decade of that. But I know that one of them generated over 6 years, 22 to 1 net of fees. I don't know what the compound annual internal rate of return is for that, but it was stupid. By the way, I've never equaled those returns since. What I found in microcaps is that I was an extraordinary $100 million manager, and I was an average $1 billion manager. So
yeah, it's the more money you invest, the harder it is to achieve.
certainly, if you're in the microcap space, it's difficult to add value to $1 billion portfolio.
Yeah. Okay, great story. So it's very easy. We just have to do it ourselves. Okay.
We need to work hard over a long period of time. It sounds easy.
For sure. And what came into my mind is this saying of you or someone who told you this, that God, please just give me one more bull market. I will not waste it, or something like that.
That was on a bumper sticker I saw in Midland, Texas in 1982. You know, Midland had been a boomtown in the 70s, and it got emptied in 1982. And I saw this wonderful bumper sticker that said just that. God, give me one more boom. I promise not to waste this one.
Yeah, great.